Hello and welcome to another edition of the Cyclone Insider podcast. I'm Travis Hines. He's Eugene Rapay. We're coming to you on Thursday afternoon. Now, just a week and a half, 2 weeks away almost from Iowa State's season opener in football in Dublin against Kansas State. We are right on the precipice of things really heating up for football. Obviously, we're warm, but we're not quite at a boil yet. And I would imagine after probably tomorrow, Friday, and into early next week, that's going to reach a boil. Iowa State had its first, I believe, of 3 scrimmages that they usually do in fall camp last week. They have the second tomorrow, Friday. That is really going to, I think, kick this thing into high gear, both for us on the outside and certainly for the team on the inside. We've had a chance to talk to Matt Campbell this week. Who did we talk to today? Ryan Clanton, offensive line coach, Jake Landry, running backs coach. Not a ton of information coming from them, but I do think some things worth mentioning. But Eugene, before we start getting into that, let's talk a little bit about what we heard from Friday's scrimmage. The word that I had heard kicked around the most is that it's physical, and that this is going to be a physical football team, which everybody says they're physical in the first week of August. So I guess we'll take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But I do think that is noteworthy when we've heard so much, really going back to the spring from Campbell about toughness. Now there's physical toughness and there's mental toughness. But I think sometimes the physical piece has got to come before the mental piece there. So early signs point in the right direction for Iowa State on that regard. But I do think they're really probably still, this is still camp mode, right? They're still repping. My guess is after Friday, the second scrimmage, you're really going to see, the paths diverge a little bit, where it's going to be, these are our dudes that we're taking, that we expect to be on the field in Dublin, and it's go time.
Yeah, with that first scrimmage, you could pretty much surmise that it's more of a feeling out process and just testing people out and figuring out different configurations and lineups. But physical is reassuring, especially considering everyone is now healthy. I'm sure it's a great feeling for a lot of those guys, especially the linebacker position, to really be back in pads and just get back out there and hitting everybody and getting to work all throughout the spring and summer. But that second scrimmage is definitely going to be more telling. Physical is an encouraging sign because the O-line is going to be different. The D-line is looking to improve after pretty much never getting to the quarterback or even close to the zip code of a quarterback last season. So those are encouraging signs to see, and especially at this point early on in the entire process, just a reassuring first step.
Yeah, I think, we talked to Clanton today, so maybe it's just top of mind for me, but I do think that center position is going to be one where I think a lot of dominoes fall once they figure out who that's going to be. Clanton today mentioned, who did he mention? Brendan Black, Dylan Barrett, and who's the third guy? I'm forgetting.
Jim Boniface.
Yeah, Boniface. Who has played the position before. So I do think that has got to be a domino that falls, because, if it's Brendan Black, okay, who's at right guard now? That Black has played, has started there for the last 2 years. I got the impression, I think we'll see Tyler Miller at right tackle, right? He started a million games there. Clanton was doing backflips about James Neal today. So do you have Neal then at left tackle? And then you got to figure out the interior there, where, Trevor Bohr is a guy who Clanton was, again, praising heavily today. But there's a lot of guys that are options at those guard positions. And I don't think you can probably figure out guard until you figure out center, especially if it's Black or Barrett. And I think that'll be the big thing for me going into next week is that offensive line starting to find its level? Because we know what we're going to get from Rocco. We know what we're going to get from Carson Hansen, Abu Sama. I think we have a pretty good idea of at least what to expect from the wide receivers in Chase Sowell and Xavier Townsend. Obviously we talked about the tight ends last week, but it all starts at that offensive line position. And when you're talking offensive line, you're talking where it starts is at the center position. So once they can start to figure out that, I think that's when the offense really comes into shape. And make no mistake, they got to be ready to go on August 23rd. That game is huge, and they're going to be tested by a Kansas State team that under Chris Klieman is always physical and seemingly always ready to go.
Yeah, no doubt about that. That center and guard position battle will be one of the more telling ones, especially of all the different positions to watch for. Once they iron out that center job and you can easily slot in, I'm sure like the backup, like if it's Barrett or Black, whoever doesn't get the starting center job, you can almost instantaneously slot them in at left or right guard, and then you just figure out who will get the other guard spot, and then everything goes from there.
Yeah, so that'll be an interesting one to see play out. I think, we talked last week too about corner and linebacker. Like again, I think a lot of this, the last 2-3 weeks has been about getting guys reps, giving them opportunities, and then it's really going to come down to Friday. Like, okay, who are the standouts, and then you're going to see the game planning start to go in. You're going to see where the guys that are 3, 4, 5 on the depth chart, those reps in practice are really going to dry up, and that's why again, like, Friday is a big day, I think, for Iowa State football heading into 2025, or at least obviously the early part of the season. I mean, is there anything else that you're looking at as, to hear about when they come off the practice field on Saturday or on Friday?
Just what that D line, who's it going to be, especially starting at the ends. Like, to me, that's just really interesting. I mean, the linebacker position, you have all those guys, but D end, there's so many different ways you can go with it, whether it's like the up-and-comers that are back for another year or just one of the 3 transfers that they brought in. You already know Dom Orange, similar to like Tyler Miller on the other side. Those are the obvious givens up front. But then who's going to join them on their left and right? And to me, like the D-line will be just as important as the O-line this year.
Yeah, 16 sacks all of last year, 7 in 9 Big 12 games. Like, that's just not good enough. Like that, no matter what, like I know – they were obviously limited by what they could do and who they had on the field with how many injuries they had at linebacker. But, Campbell said it on media day. Eli Rashid echoed it last week. Like, they just didn't win enough of those one-on-one battles, which on the outside, which is such a departure of what we saw for year after year with Jaquan Bailey and then Will McDonald literally setting career sack records back to back. And then if you'll remember, Eugene, this was before you were on the beat, but like towards the end of McDonald's senior season, you saw MJ Anderson, the Minnesota transfer, absolutely explode the last 3, 4, 5 weeks of the season with productivity. And a lot of that had to do with Will McDonald. And I think Eli Rashid talked about it last week when he was at the podium. Like, Dom Orange is going to attract a lot of blocks, which means there are going to be opportunities on the outside, especially on third down, that they have to take advantage of, or at least have to take advantage of to a much higher degree than they did last season, where they only had those 7 sacks in 9 games. And like, to me, there's potential there. Like, you can list out the names and there's probably damn near 10 of them that you could list as opportunities there, but nobody's a slam dunk. Like Ike Eziagu, I thought was the guy last year who you would hope was going to step up and be that guy. And it just didn't happen. Like, Campbell did say that he thought he was playing really good football down in the end of the season, but that did not translate into sacks and quarterback hurries and quarterback pressures. He's back. I think Eli Rashid, again, talked about it. He got his body right over the offseason. So is he a breakout candidate? Is it Tamatoa McDonough, the transfer from Yale, Vontae Malone from Tulsa, Cannon Butler from UNI? Like, those are guys that, Iowa State does not bring in a ton of transfers year in and year out. That's 3 guys right there that they brought in to address this. Like, those are the guys I would imagine that in a perfect world, those are the guys that play, right? Like, you brought them in to play and to be difference makers. Can they be that? And again, Eli mentioned they're longer and bigger at that position this year than they were last year. The 3 guys I just mentioned are, I think, all 6'5" or 6'4", maybe even 6'6". That, can that help you get the leverage and the speed that you need on that side? And like, the other like unspoken part of this that we haven't even really spoken about is the Big 12 is so damn good at quarterback. If you're not able to get those guys off rhythm, either just with their footwork or actually putting them on their back with sacks, like, you're putting a ton of pressure on that defensive backfield. And obviously we think Iowa State's DBs are going to be good this year, but if they've got all day, like, the secondary is going to lose that battle when you're talking 7, 8, 9 seconds for a quarterback to dissect them.
Yeah, there were definitely plays and drives last year where everyone could point to where it just felt like the opposing quarterbacks had forever and a half to throw. The Texas Tech game jumps out at me, and that's probably just because that was one of my first games at Iowa State. But especially in that last drive where Texas Tech took the lead, I get that they're dropping back and they're trying to prevent, but it felt like there were instances last year where you could easily just point at the opposing quarterback just having too much time, or like the first half of the Baylor game where Sawyer Robertson just felt like he just had too much time out there.
Well, yeah, and to echo Eli, like the other part too is like even if you're not getting the sacks, if it's something that offenses have to game plan around and account for, like that is going to make them more conservative. If they can just run your basic pass pro, not have to worry about chipping with a tight end or keeping a running back in the backfield, like that limits their ability, to really dive their whole way into their playbook and can really allow you to limit what they can do. When they don't have to do any of that, it's all bets are off. Like they can throw their whole playbook. They can put so much pressure on the outside and on those linebackers that it gets to be a really tough time. And I think that's like to some degree, like that Kansas game, I think you're looking at like where it just got absolutely shredded. And that was like the nadir of the injuries there. But again, like if that's not something that offenses have to like fear, then your defense is kind of starting like a half lap behind, it feels like, in terms of what offenses are going to try to attempt.
Yeah. Any other position group standing out to you in terms of most curious or feel like they need to prove themselves?
I'm kind of curious about like, is this Carson Hansen's breakout year? I feel like he's been on the precipice of that a couple of different times, but injuries have held him back. Everybody was so excited about Abu Sama last year because of the K-State game the year before. But I think like obviously as the year went on, Carson Hansen emerged as that number one running back. And I still think he's probably got a level or two ahead of him to get to. Can he consistently get there? Like that to me is interesting because now, again, we're talking, how many years now since Breece Hall's been in the NFL? 3 or 4?
4.
Yeah. So like Iowa State has been without a marquee running back. Again, they've had good guys. They've had productive backs, but they have not had that marquee guy that was really the staple of Campbell's early tenure at Iowa State. And even going back to Toledo, like Ken Hansen emerges that guy. And without, 2 guys we're going to talk about here in a little bit, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll, like having a more consistent and dynamic running game is going to be a huge part of what's going to define success and failure for this Iowa State offense this fall.
Yeah, and especially early on, like the receivers on paper are great, but we don't know exactly how they're going to gel with Rocco Becht. Are they going to be hitting their stride right away? Is it going to take a little bit or take a couple of games before they really iron out that connection? You know what you're getting from the tight ends, but still with so many new pieces in the passing game, it would be great for them to just have that consistent running attack that they can lean on, or Carson Hansen can take another step, or Abu Sama can still be that home run threat whenever he touches the ball.
Yeah, and like to me, somebody asked Jake Landry, the running backs coach today, like what are the differences between Sama and Hansen? And like to me, Sama is such a better running back when he is initiating contact, when he is being violent. Like everybody thinks about him as that home run threat because that's what he was at Southeast Polk. That's what he did against K-State in the snow a couple years ago. And he certainly has that in his toolbox. But to me, like the consistency of like Abu Sama being a number one back for Iowa State and being the guy, you are a violent runner. You are bringing the physicality to the defense the other way around. Sometimes when Sama does that, I feel like he's great. And then sometimes he's dancing in the backfield, going east to west, stepping out of bounds instead of initiating that contact with, he is a small or a shorter, stout, incredibly strong guy. And like his center of gravity, his leverage, like really presents difficulties for tacklers when he's able to do that. And I feel like that sets the tone too. Like it is a psychological weapon too when linebackers and DBs are coming up and on the losing end of a collision.
Yeah, and I think that's what made Carson Hansen's emergence last year, once he started to get going, so much fun to watch because you knew he was going to go downhill. You knew he was going to lower that shoulder in short yardage situations, or if they wanted to hand it off in goal line packages, like he was going to get those 2 yards or plow his way through. And while also still having that like hidden speed element, like Hansen could kick it up a gear once he was in the open field too.
Yeah, some of the guys we talked about before, I think it's worth mentioning on the NFL side here. Jaden Higgins starting on the latest depth chart for the Houston Texans. Darian Porter atop the Raiders' depth chart heading into their first preseason game. Steve Klotz catches a touchdown in practice I saw the other day. Miles Purchase with a big interception. Was that in the Hall of Fame game? Is that what that was?
I believe so, yeah.
And then obviously Jalen Knoll is with the Texans as well as his for his rookie season. Like, so a lot of guys doing good things in the NFL for Iowa State right now, which I think obviously what happens on the field at Ames is more important than anything. But especially as we transition further into the NIL era, showing players this path to NFL viability and sustainability is probably as important as anything.
No doubt. It's all about the marketing now. And if you can have that track record or just that proven path of pro development or sending guys to the pro, that'll be huge for recruiting and NIL purposes. But just looking at Higgins and Porter, you knew the Texans loved Higgins. They were very high about him going into the draft. It's good to see him really start out strong and really iron out that WR2 role for over there in Houston. But then also Porter, everyone knows the story here in Ames. Like, we all know it as Iowa State fans. It's cool to see, that happen at like a more national level, or where like people are starting to learn about who Darren Porter is and what he did to get to where he is now.
Yeah, he's going to potentially start an NFL game as a rookie, and it took him like 6 years to start a game at Iowa State. So certainly not the short way to a pro career, but I think given what we saw from Porter the last few years, not necessarily surprising to see him in that position either. Strangely enough, we are 2 weeks away from the start of football season, but I actually feel we got more information about basketball this week with TJ Otzelberger's men's basketball team wrapping up their summer workouts. We talked to TJ for a while on Tuesday, and I thought he was pretty forthcoming about where things stood. And I thought, I asked him like, who had the best summer? And he said unequivocally Milan Momcilovic. And I think if you went into the summer, if you asked TJ to like present a wish list or a list of priorities heading into summer, like Milan having a great, productive, dynamic, consistent summer, like that might be number one. And now what does this translate to this winter? Like that's going to be more important, but where we are today, like that is a huge win for Milan and Iowa State basketball, that he was like, from everything I heard, like he was that guy, like was awesome all summer long, hunting a shot, making shots, and like looked like not a different player, but a player who found that next level in his game.
Yeah, at this point of the year, that's exactly what you want to hear for TJ Otzelberger, a Cyclone fan. Just Milan Momcilovic just being more aggressive with the shot, but also just the reports of him being a little more physical, embracing that side of the game. That's something that you don't really think of. You hear of Milan Momcilovic, you think of him just kind of camping on the three-point line or trying to get open, taking open shots. But if he's embracing rebounding, or if he's embracing, kind of sticking in there, we saw him post up a little bit towards the end of last year for a turnaround J or whatever it may be. So just him mixing up his bag, but also expanding his game like that will just pay off big this winter if it translates. But at this point of the year, you can only be optimistic or happy for the signs coming out of summer practice.
Yeah, and like the dynamics will change dramatically in the fall and winter too, because they didn't have Joshua Jefferson all summer either. Like that's a huge component. Like I don't think you can draw a line between Milan breaking out and Joshua not being on the court. I don't think they're necessarily related directly, but the dynamics will change, because obviously Joshua is a guy who's really good with the ball in his hands. I think it'll make life easier for Milan, frankly, like especially if those guys can get involved in a little two-man game. But it is something like they're going to have to recalibrate when they get on the field, or on the court. I believe in September they're back for fall workouts when school gets started. And by all accounts, Joshua Jefferson was really close to being able to practice this last week. TJ said if they would have gone one more week, he would have been able to practice. So that wrist injury that was a strain but required a cast and a splint all summer long is not going to be, we don't think, a hindrance to J. Jeff this winter. The other guy that TJ talked a lot about was Jamarian Bateman, the freshman. And I think that's also hugely important. I don't know where that would have ranked on my list of priorities, but it probably would have been maybe not necessarily Bateman, but for having a two guard emerge, because with the three returning guys, the three returning starters from last year, and Tamin, Milan, and J. Jeff, that's three of your starting spots. Buchanan, I think everybody had penciled in, and by all accounts, he's had a really good summer too. So that's 4 of your 5 starters. And then that 2 spot, is it Heisey? Is it Bateman? Is it Don Nelson? And like right now, I think like if they were playing this weekend, I think Bateman would be that starting 2 guard right now.
Yeah, Jermaine Bateman's name has come out and just high praises from TJ Altenberger at every single summer availability. And that just adds to that curiosity. Like, as a freshman, is he really going to be able to make an impact right away? Is he really immersing himself into what Iowa State is looking for? You already knew that he was a big-time scorer coming out of high school, but defensively, where would he be? And you see him already just kind of buying into that all-out defense, which is that all-out mentality. He said it himself, TJ Altenberger, one thing that he loves about him is as long as he plays defense, he lets you rock out. And I think Jermaine Bateman has gotten that message. When was the last time a freshman got to see such major minutes? I mean, we didn't see it last year, so that could be another interesting wrinkle, especially with a guy like Dominic Nelson just fueling that backcourt competition, and Nate Heisey as well.
Yeah, I mean, like they're not afraid to play freshmen. Milan started as a freshman, Tamin started as a freshman, Tyrese Hunter started as a freshman. Like they're not afraid if a guy earns it to put him there. And I think the other thing about Bateman too is he's a good 3-point shooter. And when you look at this roster, like they need guys that can put the ball in the basket. Like we feel like we know what we're getting from Milan. Tamin, I think there is optimism, but like you got to temper it probably because we've seen that be bad to average. Jeff, can stretch it, but you're not going to rely on that. And then it's okay. Like Heisey, is he the guy from the first 3 months of the season or the guy from the last 6 weeks of the season? And like he's a guy like that TJ talked about needing a little bit more frankly, from this summer. Like all the praise that he heaped on Jamarian and Milan, like Heisey was a little bit more tempered of like we need a little bit more from Nate. Like got to make sure that he's pulling in the right direction and, all those kind of, vagaries, which I always read into like, hey, guys got some work to do before the season starts. And there's going to be competition at that wing spot. And like, again, like if Heisey can put the ball in the basket from 3 consistently, he's going to play, in my opinion. Like we saw he can be a plus defender. And if he puts the ball in the basket, with consistency from deep, that's a great option. Don Nelson shot 29% from 3 last year. I think we talked about this before, like with a better shot diet and not necessarily being the guy that defenses are keyed into, like that should improve, but it's 29% is 29%. Yeah. So like Bateman making threes, Heisey being consistent, like those are the kind of things like on the edges that are going to make a big difference when you already have that as solid as a rock foundation of those 3 returning starters.
And in addition to all that, it seemed like Altenberger was also pretty optimistic, I would say, about Tamin Lipsey, saying that he could get back to All-American form or the form that we saw his sophomore year 2 years ago. That's a pretty big claim to make at this point of the year in August, saying that, yeah, he's healthy, but we're expecting him to get back to that.
Yeah, and I think like we probably didn't do enough to highlight this last year, but Tamin didn't play point guard. Like Keyshawn Gilbert played point guard 95% of the time last year. Like Tamin was off the ball, whereas the previous 2 years he played point guard. He shared responsibilities with Keyshawn as a sophomore, but still shared responsibilities. Last year he was almost exclusively off the ball, and I do think he can do that obviously, but his best position is point guard, and I think that gives Iowa State a lot of options, and you can see that all Big 12 level caliber play, I think, more consistent. Like it's his strengths are going to show up more at point guard than they are at that 2 guard spot where, again, the shooting got pretty good after he broke his thumb, which again is one of those things. Like there's things that I always just like years later will shake my head at. And it's like, we knew it was bizarre, wild, and weird at the time, but still like probably didn't give it enough credence. Like Joel Lanning going from quarterback to middle linebacker. Like what the hell is that? And then we're going to go look back at Tamin Lipsey shooting the hell out of the ball with a broken thumb. Like what the hell was that? Like I think that those are the things that we're going to look back at is like just absolutely bizarre for years to come. But like him getting like, if he can, the shooting becomes less pronounced as an issue one way or the other with the ball in his hand because he can distribute and do everything that a point guard can do rather than be off the ball where you have to pull defenders with you, or you saw last year after Milan left, like that the court shrunk quite a bit. So like I think that's a huge piece for him is to get back to being and playing a point guard. I still can't believe he's a senior already. It's like the reverse George Niang, where it felt like George had been around forever by the time of his senior year. But now with Tamin, it's like, man, that 4 years went fast.
Also makes that all-time steals record just even more impressive that he's able to do that at 2.5 years, 2.5 seasons. Like that's really darn impressive.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the record book lately, but I got to think he's in line to
Get a
push for
more.
a lot of records, a lot of Monte's records, I would guess. That felt untouchable at the time, but I would imagine the steals record will be, which the steals record lasted for damn near 40 years because it was Hornacek that had it before Tamin, right? Or was it Monte? I can't remember.
It was Monte.
No, so Hornacek to Monte was 35 years or whatever, and then Tamin comes in and within a decade wipes it all away. So again, like you're talking about an all-time great Iowa State player there. Like I don't want to like kickstart a conversation here because we've been having it for almost 10 years about Melvin Edgem and whether or not he should have his number retired. But like Tamin will probably be in that kind of discussion of a guy like, should he be in the rafters when his playing career is done? And there's a lot of evidence and a lot of talking points I would think that would suggest that as a possibility or a probability.
Yeah, at the rate we're going, I think the only thing holding Tamin back would be that, it's too soon to hang it up. He's got to wait X amount of years before he can get the call.
Yeah, Eugene, you're showing how new you are to the beat because that is a major point of contention among Iowa State fans of the rules. It's at least 10 years because you have to be in the Iowa State Hall of Fame to get in there, which, hint, I think George Niang is about to hit that 10-year mark. So I would think and hope, now that I'm a columnist, I can just say that like his number should be up. Like, not that that's a controversial call there. Like the interesting one is Edgem. Like there's a lot of people that argue back and forth with that. I think I ultimately come down that his number should be up there, but it's an interesting conversation that we're not going to have on August 7th, 2025. But Tamin is on a trajectory that's going to put him in that conversation.
With Niang, he was 2016, right? I feel like that's when he graduated.
Yes, 2016.
All right, so he's coming up. It's coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe this is his 10th year. He just got traded twice this summer, going back to the Jazz.
Back in his bag, going to Salt Lake City.
Yeah, I'm sure all his friends and family who thought they were going to watch him all winter in Boston are a little disappointed. I don't know if George will be disappointed. Now you don't have to worry about tickets quite as much in Salt Lake City as you did in Boston.
Only the real ones.
All right, I think now that we're talking about Jazz basketball tickets, we should probably wrap this thing up. He's Eugene. I'm Travis. This has been the Cyclone Insider podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching for all of those of you on YouTube. And again, don't forget, this show is now available on YouTube each week. So check that out. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.